Hey, keep your thoughts and comments coming in on the topic of thankfulness. It is Thanksgiving Thursday. What are you grateful for on a Thursday? It's as good a day as any to be grateful for something, isn't it? Going to be talking Thanksgiving, and in particular talking about the Thankfulness Project with Ferg Turnbull. That's coming up. But before we get to 12 midday, firstly, though, talking, a response to the hikoi and, of course, the protests about the Treaty Principles Bill from the Hope Project. Dave Mann, kia ora. Good morning. Thanks for your time.
Kia ora, Andrew.
This is a hot topic at the moment. Certainly caused some controversy, or at the very least, some people with some strong opinions to take to the streets to let their feelings be known. Generally, I suppose a peaceful protest, but certainly a strong message communicated in Wellington, just over a week ago.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd first of all give my paki and applause to you. I think the interviews you've done are absolutely amazing. And for anyone listening, you can jump online and find the Shine TV, Radio Rhema interviews that have been done with different people from New Zealand on this topic. Spectacular. Yep. The other one I was really impressed with and enjoyed was Family First, Bob McCoskrie.
Okay.
All panelists there. And I think what I celebrate here personally is that we're having the conversation. I think the freedom of speech around the conversation is actually more important than the topics itself. The reasons for the division, I think, are also quite clear. There's big questions around exactly how the treaty, especially Article 2, Tino Rangatiratanga, is to be defined.
Yep.
And I mean, on the one hand, I applaud, therefore, Seymour's freedom to put out his three simple statements. Everyone mightn't like them, but they are obviously true statements in and of themselves. I think they're deficient statements. But again, there is a valid question around the principles, but equally for Māori and others to go on a hikoi and to experience some kotahitanga together, in the hope that we might have a broader reaching kotahitanga around these things in the years to come. So I celebrate. I think it's been fantastic despite the discomfort, and the conversation's important.
And I suppose freedom of speech all round. Because it's very easy to get a little bit tribal on this and take sides and go, well, our side should have freedom of speech and the other side shouldn't because they're bad or whatever. But that's not how freedom of speech works, right? If we have rights of freedom of speech to express our opinion, the same also needs to be true for people that we disagree with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The freedom of speech is going to be the thing that those with power will always want to squash because they believe what they say is true and the opposition is wrong. I mean, the history of it, we could look at the Bible, but just for some history, John Knox's story stands out to me as amusing at the moment. And he was a reformer in Scotland, influenced by Calvin in France. John Calvin comes back with Reformation ideas and challenges the corruptions of government and church power. Mm-hmm. Regarding church power, he starts the Church of Scotland, which is where Presbyterianism comes from. But regarding government power, it's noted with humour that his funeral had very few political and power attendees. So why do so people turn up to his funeral? And the answer is because no one liked him. So why was John Knox so hated by those with power but loved by those without? And it's because he made the 10 Commandments the basis for their common law, which protected the rights of the people from corrupt power. He then told the common people, you've got to stand up against corrupt power and speak. So these serfs, these poor people living on land, suddenly get empowered with the idea that they have a view and they're allowed to speak. And this stopped, therefore, the overreaches of those with power. It's absolutely vital. Without free speech, there's no conversation. And the greatest threat to free speech is corrupt power. So it's important. I celebrate it. I think we could all celebrate it. That these are like first world problems. You know, the rest of the world, so many people have no voice whatsoever. Here we are having an open debate, disagreeing and not liking people who think different to ourselves. It is fantastic.
And essentially these are, I mean, as you mentioned, these are biblical principles. These are Christian principles. And first world problems, let's unpack that a little bit because we're talking about free speech issues in a culture which has come from a European Christian tradition. That's why we're able to even have this debate. Actually, this is one of the good things about the culture that we have here worth celebrating.
Yeah, this is the lost history of New Zealand. We've recently endorsed through the government an education regarding some of the bicultural history from 1840.
Yep.
We need to really do that at least from 1814. But we've also got a whole values history. We're in one of the most free, prosperous, equality-based, charitable nations on the planet and in human history.
Yep.
Why? The answer is Christianity. Genesis 1:27, created in the image of God, given a consciousness and a mind, but also within that free will to make moral decisions and relational decisions. God respected our right to eat the apple or the fruit from the tree we were told not to.
Mm.
He allowed us to create endless suffering on this planet because free will is so important. This is about the rights of the individual to hold their opinion. The Ten Commandments, these are the foundational human rights statements of human history. I would love to have time to unpack these because it's so powerful. Just for one of them, you could ask me more. Don't murder. It's not just about the right. It's not just about not killing as a
Yep.
moral instruction. It's about my right to sleep in my home at night without being scared of someone killing me.
Yeah.
But it's also about the limitation of government powers, that the government doesn't have the rights to unjustly kill me either.
Mm.
So do not murder is actually a human rights statement, not only about don't kill people, but about the right to be in a safe society and free from the corruptions of government.
Mm.
So don't commit adultery is actually the beginning of the women's rights movement, because men have ruled the world all through history until Christianity influenced it and changed it.
Yeah.
In which case, don't commit adultery protected the women and the environment for the children from sexual abuse, because men have truly dominated in all areas through history. So the command, do not commit adultery, wasn't about limiting sexual freedom, but about actually protecting the rights of women and children. And so, yeah, there's a profound Jewish Christian heritage to our cultural views. And I think this is a story that needs telling too.
This is a game changer, really. Some people think, oh yeah, the Ten Commandments, that's the fun police, that's stopping us
Yes.
from doing all the things. But actually, seeing the Ten Commandments as the foundation for our human rights, that puts things in a very different perspective. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go through all 10. But hey, save that conversation for another time. Just wanting to circle back to the hikoi, though. Yes, the right to protest is important, but the hikoi overall, are we better off as a society because this has happened? Are you okay to nail your colours to the mast on this one? Dave, what's your thoughts on the hikoi process and the things that are being protested against?
Yeah, I have mixed thoughts on this. The hikoi was being organised, and the Common Grace were putting out their statement before David Seymour's principles had even been articulated and put on paper.
Yeah.
So something of rationality left the house. At the same time as saying that, there's been a coming together of Māori around issues. There's been, I personally think the over promises and the over giving of Labour, the Labour government, they failed to bring the people with them. All leadership, you've got to bring people with you. You don't just dictate what you think is right.
Yeah.
That's the opposite to individual human rights, the corruption of power. So I think they're pushing through of what they believed was right. Whether it was right or not is irrelevant at this point. Unfortunately, they didn't bring the people with them, and so you're going to get a natural reaction. And that's led to an unfortunate polarization. I think what's positive in the mix of this is things like your interviews and Family First's interview, and that we suddenly see here in the Christian community the ability of people with differing views to come together and have civil conversation without animosity and hatred toward the other, actually modeling how reconciliation can take place. And so I think just as Christianity was intrinsic to the birthing of the treaty and nationhood and equality for people in our nation, Christianity is probably yet the hope for our nation and the hope for the treaty. And I just pray that this can be found and seen, and that all of us can find our voice in the spirit of Christ to see that come about. So mixed feelings, but overarching view, positive, because we've got our free speeches, and that's the context for a future.
It's certainly being able to have a conversation with somebody that we disagree with is a good place to start. And I suppose respecting their dignity, their mana, that they are made in the image of God, regardless of whether or not we agree on the policies, an important place to start in that regard. Dave, also wanting to commend the wonderful resources that you have put in place as well, in terms of an understanding of our history as a nation and the role of Christianity within our history and some of the founding principles that we have. In fact, as we take part in this discussion, I would commend to people some of those resources. If we're going to have this conversation, let's have an understanding about our history and the role that faith has played into where we've got so far, regardless of whether or not you share those views or those faith. Let's recognize the truth of that. Lots of resources available online in that space. Dave, if people wanted to connect with that, if they wanted to do a little bit of a deep dive into some of the history behind these principles, what's the best way of connecting with that?
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest, first of all, going to bigbookpublishing.co.nz. We also have a collection of various videos related to history at altogether.co.nz/NZ history.
Okay.
And that's got a whole range of different speakers and people on, in particular, different treaty issues. There's certainly a longer journey. I personally think more can yet and should yet be given to Māori. That's my personal slant within the picture. But it's going to have to be a conversation we have together and come to conclusions upon together in the spirit of Christ.
Yeah. Hey, Dave, thanks for what you do. Thanks for taking the time to chat with us today. Kia ora.
Cheers.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.